Why do we love making characters? We spend hours in video game character creation screens to days scrolling over Dungeons & Dragons character sheets fleshing out our background stats and lore. Character creation has garnered the admiration of gamers on a universal level across video games and tabletop games alike, with such an infamous presence that memes exist of spending hours playing a new game just for all that time to be spent in the character creator without even touching the actual gameplay, and many people who play tabletop RPGs just to use the game's systems as a means of making characters. Among online communities, different video games get their character creators compared to one another by fans over which is better. Typically, a better creator gives the player more control and looks better visually, but everyone gets something different out of character creation. In this video, I aim to analyze and break down why we all love character creation so much and for what reasons, as well as how fictional characters we create can mean more to us than we realize and the implications that has with regards to our real-life identities. One of the main facets of why we enjoy character creation are the obvious reasons, and that is that we enjoy being both the designers and players to our own realities. If nothing else, the player we create will be the thing we look at during our playtime in a third-person game, or in the case of a first-person game, we just know what we look like, which could be argued makes character creation less important, but what about pen and paper tabletop RPGs, where a visual is not even inherently present unless artwork is made by commission or the player themselves? I would argue that even in the event of tabletop RPGs and first-person games, character creation is still just as important as when you can actually see your character. A concept I'll get more into later in the video is that these fictional characters we make are extensions of both ourselves and our identities, and why that is massively important. So, when presented with a character creator on the newest highly anticipated game, we want that character to mean something to us, as they will be the way we experience the game for who knows how long our playtime of the game will be. In the case of an action RPG, like Elden Ring for example, that playtime could stretch well past the 100-hour mark on a single character. There come a few givens with making something ourselves, the first being personalization. If any two people are sat down and tasked with creating a character to their liking, the result would be very different. At least that would be the case for any character creator worth its salt, being one that has a multitude of different options and making the chance for coincidental similarities to be slim. Like the clothes we wear, a custom character is an expression of our identity and tastes. This takes form in aesthetics, to fictional tropes we enjoy, as well as how any emotional or sentimental attachment may impact our customization. In the case of a storyteller's point of view, character creation in its vein can also be done to serve the purpose of roleplay. Tabletop RPGs like D&D have this as the main point of making characters. You get to act them out with the thought, what would my character do? So, that character's design aids in better roleplay, like an author writing a character, describing their appearance and personifying their actions. This also ties into my next point, character builds. When talking about player builds, I am referring typically to how a character is designed in regards to gameplay. In an action RPG like Dark Souls, for example, this would be the character's stats, armor, and weapons. Similarly, in D&D, it would also be things like stats, as well as race and class. Elements that impact and determine the playstyle and gameplay is what I attribute to being a character's build. So, while not necessarily a visual part of the character creation, player builds can still be aesthetically attributed to design as well as the aforementioned personalization of making a character. Tropes such as strong characters being meatheads or rogues being edgy show a character's physical attributes can show through in their personality. While tropes like this are not always true and should not always be true, a character's build can personify the character. Some races within D&D lore speak more closely to different people and their real-world experiences. Maybe someone who has always found themselves ostracized in real life thinks that the Tiefling race feels more personal to them, and they can relate to it more closely in their character as a result. This is what I mean when referring to personalization, as this touches on both the sincere element of creation and ties in with builds. Another aspect of builds is replayability. Replayability is highly sought after in games, given most AAA games go for $60 USD, with some next-gen games reaching even $70 USD, so people want to get what they pay for. So, character builds can serve as a way of getting a very different experience out of the same game on a subsequent playthrough. This is one of the most straightforward reasons why character creation is so great, but still absolutely worth mentioning. But I'd be mistaken to not mention a third element of character creation that I know both myself and so many others get a great deal of joy out of, and that's the goofiness of it. This aspect is significantly more subjective and open to interpretation, which is part of the reason why I consider it to be one of the three main pillars that make up good and enjoyable character design. The very subjective nature of it, I think, adds a lot to be gained and learned in why we all enjoy character creation so much. But what do I mean by goofiness exactly? The first simple way to describe it would be humor and its use in character creation. Allow me to break down how I think this takes shape. No matter how polished game developers try to be, bugs and glitches will always exist in games, with some games more than others. Many people take great joy in when a game does not work as intended, with a decent size of Skyrim fans attributing the janky, silly nature of the bugs as a source of amusement for them. I think typically humor like this is derived from the stark contrast of the game taking itself seriously in regards to its setting and characters, while bugs lead to silly situations that the game is entirely unaware of how to deal with. The more clear it is the bugs don't belong or that the game isn't working right, the funnier it all becomes. But what do bugs like this have to do with character creation exactly? Well, in a similar vein, character creation can also derive humor from stark tonal contrast. Making characters with the intent to make them look like they don't belong in any shape or form to the game that they are about to be played in is funny, similar to the way bugs can be funny. From my own experience playing games, my favorite game of all time is Bloodborne, an action RPG set in a gothic horror Lovecraftian environment. Making characters in this game is really enjoyable for me because of how much control I have over the character. I'm able to make the silliest creature imaginable that stands out tremendously to the rest of the game tonally and aesthetically. This is my Bloodborne character, which I named Bigsley Laughsman. And I had my partner, who has never played Bloodborne before, design a character and created this creature, which they named Glass of Milk. With games attempting to be as polished as can be, there is also a humorous joy in pushing a game's character creator to the limits of what it can produce while still trying its best to look natural. One of the biggest and best examples of character creators like this is without a doubt the action RPG Souls games from game studio From Software. The reason why I chose their games over something like Skyrim, for example, is that From Software does something really interesting with their character creation screens. Most character creators give preset models, such as specific noses or eyes to pick from, while From Software gives sliders ranging from every value possible for how big, small, tall, short, wide, narrow, close, and far apart the features on the face can be, allowing for immense sovereignty over the design of a character. When contradicting sliders on opposite ends of the spectrum, it begins to push the limits for how natural characters can look. Colors can also range anywhere in the RGB spectrum, rather than only having traditional hair or skin colors available to the player. This amount of supreme control over what the player can make lends itself tremendously well to both sincere and silly character customization. The first Dark Souls game is iconic for its create similar face option, and accompanying slider ranging from same to different. When pressing the create similar face button, the game would instantaneously generate a new face based off the previous one, overwriting it with a whole new face, so players would move the slider all the way to different and mash the create similar face button in order to create a random creature with the most ridiculous facial features. Just because character creation can be done with the goal to be humorous does not necessarily mean it has to be any less creative as a sincere character. In a D&D one-shot campaign group I was a part of about a year ago, one of our friends, Jack, was too busy with finals to take part, but planned on still being there to witness some of it. So while joking around with our friend Nick, they decided to have his warlock character hear a voice in his head of the god whom he worshipped and drew his power from. This took shape during the playthrough of the campaign by having that voice be our friend Jack. So while munching on Cheez-Its and doing schoolwork, Jack would interject his thoughts and tell Nick to do inane and silly things, oftentimes which the DM would make him roll a d20 to determine if his character would actually succumb to the voice's demands or not. Finally, we have identity. This concept I would largely tie into the concept of sincere character creation that I discussed at the start of the video, but I wanted to give it its own section as there is a lot to unpack in it, and with it come some heavier topics. So when speaking about personalization and self-expression, as discussed previously in the video, these two things firmly take root in each person's own identity. So these player characters are just as real to us as our real-life clothes, personality, and interests, despite just being a simulated work of fiction. The virtual and fictional worlds cannot exist without the context of the real world, so as a result, fictional player characters can be real in their consequences. This is a theory of sociology called the Thomas theorem, formulated in 1928 by William Isaac Thomas and Dorothy Swine Thomas, which states, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. So, in order to analyze how the Thomas theorem applies to player characters, we need to examine a specific case study of a virtual crime. Light content warning for the article I'm about to discuss, as it deals with the mention of rape, so if you're uncomfortable with that topic, please skip to this time in the video. In 1993, freelance journalist Julian Dibbell published the article A Rape in Cyberspace. In it, he discusses the events surrounding a virtual rape of several persons' player characters within the game. The game was called LambdaMoo, and it was a MUD. What is a MUD, you may ask? MUD typically stands for Multi-User Dungeon, and it's a multiplayer, real-time virtual world, somewhat akin to modern MMO RPGs, but they were usually text-based given the hardware limitations at the time. LambdaMoo was primarily used for social interaction and chatting, so its users interacted through script, and users could program their avatars to take on any appearance based on a text description which other users could read when interacting with one another within the cyberspace. Elements of character creation can be found here, even in the purely text-based world of LambdaMoo, so how was a virtual crime committed? Using a subprogram, the perpetrator in the story, known in the game as Mr. Bungle, was capable of attributing actions to other characters that their users did not actually write, causing the victims and everyone else present in the room at the time of the assault to see a description of the depraved acts being written across their computer screens. The crimes occurred to a handful of victims before a moderator, known as Wizards, was finally summoned and caged Mr. Bungle, preventing him from continuing his assault. His assault ranged from deprived to increasingly violent. These events led to outcry from the MUD users over how to treat Mr. Bungle moving forward. Many of them desired for Wizards to toad him, toad being a moderator command to change the description of the character to nothing more than that of a nondescript toad, effectively deleting the character forever. Ultimately, the fate of Mr. Bungle, after days of debate, was to be toaded, acted out by one lone wizard who made no announcement of Mr. Bungle's demise. For a significantly more in-depth look at what happened within LambdaMoo's user base following the events of Mr. Bungle's crimes, I highly recommend giving the entire article a read. I'll leave a link to the article in the description below. This article is highly cited in regards to legal and ethical debate surrounding the engagement with new and emerging technologies. As tech rapidly evolves, we don't have the time to enact policies or consider the ramifications they have on real life. After describing the crimes that took place in the living room setting of LambdaMoo for so many users to read, nothing actually happened in real life. No physical person was ever raped, only a single stream of words on a computer screen. But are they really all that separate? The descriptions of these characters serve as the way for users to interact with one another and the game's cyberspace. So when the user Legba had the description of their character raped and read the vile acts on screen, the Thomas theorem states the mental and emotional toll they took would not be any less real in its consequences as a real-life rape. In the article, when referring to what Legba's user had to say about the incident after it happened, Dibbell states, months later, the woman in Seattle would confide to me that as she wrote those words, post-traumatic tears were streaming down her face, a real-life fact that should suffice to prove that the word's emotional content was no mere play acting. Even without visual imagery, the emotions surrounding the event are still just as severe. An attack on a fictional depiction of a user, that user's identity, was just as serious as an attack on their physical self. When speaking in regards to identity, playable characters also allow for a really unique opportunity with roleplay. Lisa Nakamura describes this opportunity as identity tourism. In her article, Race in for Cyberspace, Identity Tourism and Racial Passing on the Internet, she also dives into the cyberspace of LambdaMoo to analyze an occurrence separate from the one Julian Dibbell wrote about that we just discussed. She examines the use of race and gender in the text descriptions of people's identities and how an online multiplayer setting impacts their experience. In the virtual space, you can be anyone or anything without anyone else knowing who you truly are, and particularly without the real-world consequences of being in a minority group. Nakamura states, tourism is a particularly apt metaphor to describe the activity of racial identity appropriation, or passing, in cyberspace. The activity of surfing the internet not only reinforces the idea that cyberspace is not only a place for travel and mobility or future distractions, but also figures it as a form of travel which is inherently recreational, exotic, and exciting, like surfing. The choice to enact oneself as a samurai warrior in LambdaMoo constitutes a form of identity tourism which allows a player to appropriate an Asian racial identity without any of the risks associated with being a racial minority in real life. For anyone interested in the topic, I recommend you give the full article a read. I will leave a link to it in the description below. People can take on entire other lives with roleplay, which is typically a point of praise when referring to fantasy role-playing games like D&D, but within a virtual space it can lead to appropriation, be it intentional or not. Although this is not solely the case, especially with regard to games made in the modern day, the growing diversity of the games industry can lead to incredible forms of immersive identity tourism where players can experience lives far unlike their own. Games like Ghost of Tsushima are culturally and historically significant deep dives into the identity of its samurai main character. While not one-to-one historically accurate to the real-life Mongol invasions of Japan, it serves as an immersive set piece to showcase culture and identity in a time of turmoil. Nakamura concludes her piece on this subject with a relatively positive note. Quote, "Programming language and internet connectivity have made it possible for people to interact without putting into play any bodies but the ones they write for themselves. The temporary divorce which cyber discourse grants the mind from the body and the text from the body also separates race and the body. Player scripts which eschew repressive versions of the Oriental in favor of critical rearticulations and recombinations of race, gender, and class, and which also call the fixedness of these categories into question, have the power to turn the theatrical characteristic of Moo space into a truly innovative form of play, rather than a tired reiteration and reinstatement of old hierarchies. Role-playing is a feature of the Moo, not a bug, and it would be absurd to ask that everyone who plays within it hew literally to the real-life gender, race, or condition of life. A diversification of the roles which get played, which are permitted to be played, can enable a thought-provoking detachment of race from the body and an accompanying question of the essentialness of race as a category." Character creation will always mean very different things to different people. What we each get out of it won't always be the same, though I firmly believe for people who consider themselves gamers, what it means to them is some combination of what I discussed today. Maybe it's all sincere and they love to be an author to a character of their own imagination, role-playing a character that echoes elements of themselves in their D&D game with friends, or making characters the most absurd horde creatures that look nothing like any NPC in the game. For some, character creation may not mean much at all, resigning the thought to the expectation that their character's face will be obscured by a helmet anyways. And while I would like to call that psycho behavior, I understand it's not for everyone, and in some games it feels less of the point compared to something like D&D, where it could be argued character creation is the whole point. As someone who hopes to one day make games, I know character creation will always mean a lot to me, and after talking about the importance it can have, I hope it means a lot to all of you too.